And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome aboard. I'm National Weather Service Meteorologist Peter Chan with your Alaska Marine Weather Outlook on this Monday, June 2nd, 2025. Starting with the state of the sea ice across the Chukchi Sea, Beaufort Sea. We still have a lot of ice in place along the Beaufort Sea, but we do have larger areas opening, Polinias from off of Point Ley and off of the Lisburn Peninsula, as well as down here through the Bering Strait. Still a few areas of remnant ice on the south side of Norton Sound around Stebbins and St. Michael, and then on over toward areas of St. Lawrence Island. And this will just continue to be a slow melt-off process as we head through the late spring, early summer season. Though of note, it's been cold. Below normal temperatures have really persisted along the Arctic coast and the North Slope. There could even be some additional light snow in through the spine of the Brooks Range this midweek. So still some chilly conditions persisting there, but we do have a wet and breezy low late tonight into early Tuesday morning. It'll be pushing into the southwest coast, especially up there toward Kuskokwim Bay. This front is slowly going to work its way north and eastward. But if that's not enough, there's another low down here in the North Pacific, and this one's going to follow in a track on the Pacific side of the Alaska Peninsula on up toward between Kodiak Island and the Kenai Peninsula by Wednesday. And this could force more in the way of moisture up into south central and areas of the Gulf for midweek. So it could be quite a soaking, even in places like Anchorage Bowl. Some of the forecast models showing 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch of rainfall with that system Wednesday afternoon and Wednesday evening. By the time we get into Tuesday, though, we have the front continuing to kind of weakening and pushing off toward the north and east. Here comes that next wetter low, and I'll show you that tomorrow as we get into that time frame. But by Wednesday, we have that low located there in the western Gulf, kind of between Kodiak Island and the southern Kenai Peninsula there, south of Homer. And that could pull in a fair amount of moisture into south central areas of the mainland and spreading it along the Gulf Coast as this front works its way northeastward toward the Panhandle. It will be weakening, but nevertheless have some more rain as the whole pattern we've been talking about going into the first half of June. Just unsettled, leaning toward the cooler side, and occasionally wet. So taking a look, that's an old image, but looking here at what we have for south winds through the inner channels of the Panhandle on Tuesday, 10 to 15 knots, waves 2-3 feet, Lynn Canal, Stevens Passage, and then as we get down toward Dixon Entrance, maybe 6-foot waves. Off of Craig, variable winds 5 knots, 8-foot swells, and then south winds turning southeasterly, generally 10 knots off of Sitka to outside of Yakutat Bay. Swells running about 8 feet. And then for Wednesday, south-southwest winds inner channel, 10 to 15 knots, waves a few feet there, Lynn Canal, Stevens Passage, and then down here toward Dixon Entrance and the vicinity and south outside of Metlakatla, waves could run a couple few feet. Winds westerly 15 knots coming in toward Prince of Wales Island from the Gulf. And then as winds turn southerly, 15 knots from off of Sitka and Port Alexander to outside of Cross Sound, and then turning southeast to east as high as 30 knots as you get out toward Cape Suckling. And then Tuesday, some brisker winds, southeast winds for within Prince William Sound to 25 knots, also outside of Hinchinbrook Entrance along the Kenai coast to Lower Cook Inlet. Southeast winds to 25 knots, waves running 6 to 8 feet. As we go through middle and upper Cook Inlet, look for southeast to east winds 15 to 20 knots, waves 2-4 feet there. Wednesday winds will not be quite as strong in some areas. We're having that low center coming up into this region. So east-northeast winds here, 20 knots within Prince William Sound, 4-foot waves. East-southeast winds outside of Hinchinbrook Entrance to Kayak Island with waves of 7 to 8 feet. As we come down Cook Inlet, north winds 10 to 15 knots, waves 3 to maybe 4 feet there as you get out before Kennedy Entrance. And then for Kodiak Island Tuesday, look for south winds 20 to 25 knots, 6-foot waves Shelikof Strait, up to 10-footers off of Kodiak Island. And then on the North Pacific side, west-southwest winds 20-25 knots, waves 8-9 feet. On the Bering side of the peninsula, look for south-southwest winds 15 to 20 knots with waves of 3 to as high as 5 feet north of Cold Bay. And then on Wednesday, winds will be west-northwest across Kodiak Island, 15 to 20 knots. And across the Alaska Peninsula, generally west-northwest winds 15 to 20 knots as well. Waves 5 feet on the North Pacific side, 4 to 5 feet on the Bering side. For Tuesday, the eastern Aleutians around Dutch Harbor on Alaska, west winds 15 to 20 knots, falling off, becoming more variable, especially on the north side of the chain going through the central Aleutians, only around 10 knots, and then just variable winds around 10 knots, rather light out there across the western chain west of Adak. And then for Wednesday, northwest winds 15 knots across the eastern Aleutians on Alaska to Nikolsky. Once we get from Atka back through Adak and Kiska, generally just variable winds around 10 knots, so pretty light there. For Tuesday, we have the low that's going to be working its way up toward Etolan Strait, so ahead of it, south winds into Bristol Bay, 15 knots, southeast winds 10 knots within Kuskokwim Bay, and on the west side of the system, northwest winds 15 to 20 knots from St. Matthew down to the Pribilofs at St. Paul and St. George, and then an east wind 20 knots out of Norton Sound, northeast to northwest along the lower Yukon coast at about 10 knots with waves there a couple of feet. And then on Wednesday, winds will be westerly within Kuskokwim, Bristol Bays to 20 knots, waves 3 to 4 feet along the YK Delta, especially the lower Yukon coast into Norton Sound. Look for northwest winds 10 to 15 knots, waves 2 to 3 feet. And across the far north through the Bering Strait, winds north-northeast off of the north and west side of the Seward Peninsula at 15 knots. North winds to 15 knots, north side of St. Lawrence Island, waves generally 3 to 4 feet there. As we come up around the Lisburn Peninsula and we get up past Cape Lisburn, look for northeast winds becoming easterly 20 to as high as 25 knots off of Wainwright, but otherwise easterly winds along the Beaufort Sea coast at 20 knots with ice still in place there. And Wednesday, a continuation of east winds right around 20 knots along the Beaufort Sea coast, increasing a bit east-northeast from Wainwright down to Cape Lisburn at 25 knots. And then a mixed bag of winds once you get south of Point Hope. West winds coming into Kotzebue Sound at 20 knots. And then we're looking at north winds 15 to 20 knots along the west side of the Seward Peninsula and the north side of St. Lawrence Island at Gamble and Savunga.